Authority is a powerful thing. When someone in a uniform knocks on your door, flashing a badge, speaking in an official tone, most people don't question it. They comply. They pay the fines. They sign the papers. They believe. But what happens when the authority isn't real? What happens when a uniform is a disguise and the badge is a lie? That's what I learned the day 3 men in police uniforms showed up at my door, demanding I pay a $500 fine for a noise complaint. One that never happened. And when I called the HOA, they told me the unthinkable. No one had been sent. So, who were these men? And more importantly, why did they already have my banking information? What happened next changed everything. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through my phone, enjoying the quiet of the morning, when a sudden, loud pounding on my front door jolted me upright. Bam, bam, bam. My heart jumped into my throat. It was early, too early for delivery, and I wasn't expecting visitors. For a split second, I just sat there, my coffee cup hovering midair, listening to the aggressive, unrelenting knocks. Bam, bam, bam. I swallowed hard, set my mug down, and stood up. My instincts were already on high alert. Something felt wrong. I moved toward the door, hesitating just before reaching for the handle. Instead, I peeked through the peephole, and that's when my stomach dropped. 3 men stood outside, dressed in full police uniforms, dark sunglasses, black shirts, utility belts loaded with gear. The tallest one, a buzz-cut, square-jawed guy with a stone-cold expression, stood at the front, his hand casually resting on the baton strapped to his hip. The way he held himself, the way his shoulders squared with absolute confidence, I knew immediately these weren't door-to-door solicitors. Taking a slow, steadying breath, I unlocked the door and cracked it open, just enough to see their faces. The buzz-cut guy didn't hesitate. "Sir, we had noise complaints from your neighbors," he said, his voice clipped deep and authoritative, the kind of voice that makes you instinctively straighten your back. I frowned. Noise complaints. I glanced at my watch. It's 9 a.m. I've been home alone all morning. I haven't even turned on the TV. His expression didn't change. Instead, he reached into the chest pocket of his uniform and pulled out a piece of paper. It was thick, official-looking, with bold print at the top. Homeowners Association violation notice. You've been warned before. Buzzcut said, this is your second offense. We're issuing you a $500 fine. I scoffed. Warned before? By who? I took the paper from him and scanned it. No dates. No details. No specific complaint. Just a vague statement about disturbing the peace and a fine amount at the bottom. This didn't make sense. This is ridiculous, I said, shaking my head. I want to see the complaint. Buzzcut's jaw tightened. That information is classified, he said flatly. A chill ran down my spine. Classified? I narrowed my eyes. By who? The Homeowners Association has jurisdiction over this neighborhood, he replied, as if that explained everything. And suddenly, I realized something. Yes, my HOA was strict. They fined people for leaving trash cans out too long, for painting their mailbox the wrong color. But this? Noise complaints? Police involvement? That was new. I took a step forward. I want to speak to someone at the HOA directly. Buzzcut's voice sharpened. Refusal to comply will result in legal action. My jaw clenched. Legal action for what? Having a quiet morning at home. The man didn't budge. You can pay the fine now, he said, or risk further penalties. The 2 other men behind him flanked his sides, their hands resting casually on their belts. The air felt different now. Charged, like there was a threat hanging just beneath the surface. I could feel my pulse in my throat. This wasn't right. Something was seriously wrong. For a moment, I just stood there, gripping the violation notice, my pulse hammering in my ears. The 3 men didn't move, their posture stiff, their hands resting near their belts like they were ready for something more than just issuing fines. Everything about this fell off. The way they carried themselves, the coldness in Buzzcut's voice, the fact that I had never even received a first warning. My gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. Fine, I said, keeping my hand to my sides, trying not to let them see the tension creeping into my shoulders. I'm not paying a dime until I speak to the HOA. That should have been the end of it. That should have been where they handed me a number to call and walked away. But instead, Buzzcut took a step closer, just enough to invade my space. His sunglasses reflected the morning sun, and I could see my own rigid expression mirrored back at me. "This is a negotiation," he said, his voice dropping an octave, smooth and controlled. "Pay the fine or face the consequences." The other two men took a step forward in sync, silent but present, reinforcing the pressure, their hands still resting on their belts. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just an intimidation tactic. These guys weren't behaving like HOA representatives or even law enforcement. They were behaving like muscle, like enforcers who were used to people backing down. I swallowed hard, willing myself to stay calm. "I'll handle it with the HOA directly," I said through clenched teeth. I wasn't going to be bullied into handing over money, not without proof of an actual offense. Buzzcut stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment, the air between us thick with something unspoken. Then, without a word, he slipped the paper into my hand. "You have 24 hours to comply," he said, his voice as emotionless as before. I watched as they turned and walked down my driveway toward a black SUV parked at the curb. I expected to see police markings, HOA logos, something official, but there was nothing. No emblem, no identification, just a plain, unmarked vehicle with tinted windows. My unease deepened as they climbed inside and pulled away, disappearing down the street, as if they had never been there. I stood there, heart pounding, gripping the fine notice so tightly my fingers ached. What the hell had just happened? Something about the way they operated, the way they tried to force my compliance without offering real proof, set off every alarm in my mind. And one question echoed louder than the rest. Who exactly were those men? As soon as the SUV disappeared down the street, I closed the door and immediately grabbed my phone. My hands were still shaking as I pulled up the number for the HOA office. Whatever was going on, I needed answers. Fast. The line rang twice before a cheerful voice picked up. "Hi, this is Rachel with Westbrook HOA. How can I help you?" I exhaled sharply, trying to keep my voice calm. "Yeah, hi. I just had 3 officers at my door claiming to be from the HOA. They issued me a fine for a noise complaint." For a moment, there was silence. Then Rachel's tone shifted, slower, more careful. "I'm sorry, what?" I gripped the phone tighter. "They said they were with the HOA police. Tall guy with a buzz cut, 2 others with him. They said it was my second offense." Another pause. Then, in a voice that was no longer cheerful, Rachel said, "We don't have an HOA police department." My breath hitched. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Rachel said, her voice firm now. "We don't handle noise complaints that way. In fact, I'm the one who processes complaints, and I haven't received anything from your address." A cold wave of dread crawled down my spine. "Then who were those guys?" I don't know," Rachel admitted, sounding just as unsettled as I felt. "But if someone's impersonating HOA officials, you need to call the police." I ended the call, my mind racing. My first instinct was that this had to be some kind of scam. Fake enforcers shaking down residents, hoping to scare them into paying bogus fines. But there was one problem. I pulled up my bank account. My stomach dropped. The $500 had already been withdrawn. The payment was labeled as HOA fine, Westbrook HOA. My skin prickled with rage. Somehow, they had my banking information. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my phone. This wasn't just some scam. This was something bigger. And I had the sinking feeling that I had just stepped into the middle of something dangerous. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stared at the transaction on my phone screen, willing it to be a mistake, a glitch, anything other than what it was. But it was real. The money was gone, and the charge was marked as an official HOA fine. Somehow, those men had accessed my banking information. I needed to act fast. I called my bank immediately, barely able to keep my voice steady as I told them my account had been compromised. The representative on the other end moved quickly, freezing my account and flagging the charge as fraudulent. That should have been the end of it. But as I hung up, a creeping sense of unease settled over me. My gaze drifted toward the window. That's when I saw it. Across the street, a black SUV was parked under a tree. My stomach twisted into a knot. The same SUV? It was impossible to tell for sure, but I felt it in my gut. The engine was running, and behind the tinted glass, someone was watching. I stepped back from the window, my breath catching. A few seconds passed. Then, as if they knew I had spotted them, the SUV pulled away, slowly, deliberately, before disappearing around the corner. I stood there for a long moment, my pulse racing. This wasn't just some scam to steal money. It wasn't just fraud. This was personal. They had my address. They had my banking information. And now, they were watching me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment at the door, the way Buzzcut had looked at me, the way his partners had moved in sync with him. Too polished for scammers, too shady for real officers. And the fact that they had somehow accessed my bank account, that was next-level terrifying. By the time the sun rose, I was sitting at my kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee, already in my system, my hands still shaking. I wasn't just creeped out anymore. I was angry. Whoever these men were, they had crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I grabbed my phone. It was time to start fighting back. Fueled by adrenaline and a growing sense of anger, I pulled up my security camera footage on my phone. If these guys had really been watching me, there had to be proof. I rewound to the exact time they had arrived, 8:59 a.m., and watched as the black SUV pulled up to my driveway. 3 men stepped out, moving in perfect coordination. The way they walked, their posture, it wasn't random. It wasn't sloppy, like petty criminals looking for a quick scam. These guys were trained. They had the kind of confidence you only see in people who believe they have real authority. I zoomed in on Buzzcut's badge. That was the first thing that stood out. The letters HOA were printed across it, but something was off. The font wasn't quite right. The logo was slightly distorted, as if it had been copied and printed badly. At first glance, it looked real, but up close, it was a cheap imitation. I rewound again, this time focusing on their vehicle. No police markings. No HOA decals. And then I noticed something else. No license plate on the front. My hands tightened around my phone. These guys weren't with the HOA, and they sure as hell weren't cops. I needed more answers. I checked my bank statement again, looking for any other suspicious transactions. And that's when I found it. Another charge. But this one wasn't labeled as an HOA fine. It was coded under something called Private Enforcement Division. My stomach clenched. I copied the name and ran a search. Nothing. No business listings. No contact information. No records. But then, after digging deeper, I found something. A shell company out of Nevada. No physical address. No website. Just a P.O. box tied to a law firm that no longer existed. My skin prickled. Whoever these guys were, they were hiding. And then, just as I was about to shut my laptop, I noticed something else. Something that sent a cold shiver down my spine. A new email. It was in my spam folder. The subject line read, "We're watching." My breath hitched. My hand hovered over the mouse. I clicked it open. Inside was just one sentence. "You should have paid the fine." A surge of adrenaline hit me. So hard, I nearly knocked the chair over when I stood up. My phone was already in my hand before I even realized I had grabbed it. I called Officer Green, the officer I had spoken to earlier about reporting the fraud. His phone rang twice before going to voicemail. I clenched my jaw, grabbed my car keys, and headed for the door. I was done waiting. If these guys thought they could scare me into silence, they had another thing coming. I was going to find out who they were, and I was going to make them pay. I didn't waste time. After reading that email, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just creeped out anymore. I was furious. These men had stolen from me, threatened me in my own home, accessed my bank account, and now they had the audacity to taunt me. That wasn't just fraud. That was a challenge. I jumped in my car and drove straight to the HOA office. If these guys had inside access to my personal information, it had to be coming from someone within the HOA itself. Rachel had told me earlier that only she and Mr. Holloway, the HOA president, had access to resident files. So either someone hacked the system or someone was working from the inside. The HOA office was a small, nondescript building at the edge of the neighborhood. Beige walls, a brown roof, and a sad little garden out front with dead rose bushes. It looked exactly like the kind of place where rules mattered more than people. I pulled into the parking lot, slammed the car door shut, and marched inside without hesitation. Rachel was sitting behind the front desk. The moment she saw me, her eyes went wide. "Oh, hi," she stammered. "Did you?" "I need to speak with Holloway." I cut in, my voice sharp. Rachel blinked. He's in a meeting." "Then get him out." She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway behind her. "Is everything okay?" "No, Rachel, it's not." My voice was harder now. "I want to know why 3 guys pretending to be HOA enforcement had access to my bank information, and I want to know if Holloway knows anything about it." Rachel's face paled. She stood up slowly. "Okay, let me check." She disappeared down the hallway. A minute later, a door at the end creaked open, and Mr. Holloway stepped out. He was in his early 60s, gray hair neatly combed, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He wore a light blue polo and khakis, the standard uniform for a suburban dictator. His face was unreadable as he approached. "Good morning," Holloway said evenly. "Rachel said you had some concerns." I folded my arms. "Yeah, I have some concerns." My voice was ice. "Why did 3 fake cops show up at my house yesterday claiming to be from the HOA? Why did they fine me $500? And why the hell did they have access to my bank account?" Holloway's expression barely shifted. "That sounds alarming," he said carefully. "But the HOA would never handle an issue like that." That's what Rachel said. "So, how did they get my information?" His gaze sharpened just slightly. "That's not possible." "Well, it happened." I pulled out my phone and held up my bank statement. "See that? That's a direct withdrawal labeled under the HOA. Someone had access to my account. And if it wasn't you, then who the hell was it?" Holloway's mouth tightened into a thin line. "We'll investigate immediately." "Yeah, you do that." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Because if this was an inside job, if someone in this office leaked my information, I'm going to find out." His eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm asking you to tell me the truth." A long pause settled between us. Then Holloway sighed, rubbing his temple. "Give me a day to look into it." "Do it fast." I turned and walked toward the door. Then, just as my hand touched the handle, Holloway spoke again. "Wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "What?" "If someone had access to your financial records," Holloway hesitated, then his voice lowered. "You need to be careful." My grip tightened on the door handle. "Careful of what?" Holloway's eyes darkened. "Of who you ask questions to." I stared at him for a moment, searching his face for any sign of what he wasn't saying. But then, before I could reply, he turned and walked back into his office. I stood there, heart pounding, his words replaying in my head. That wasn't advice. That was a warning. I walked out of the HOA office, Holloway's words rattling around in my head like a warning shot that had barely missed. Be careful who you ask questions to. That wasn't just a general caution. It was specific. It was personal. He wasn't telling me to be careful for my own good. He was telling me to stop. But I wasn't stopping. Sitting in my car, I pulled up the security footage on my phone again, replaying the moment the black SUV had pulled up to my house. I zoomed in on the side panel of the vehicle and noticed something I hadn't seen before, a reflection. It was faint, distorted by the car's glossy surface, but I could make out a street sign. I paused the footage, enlarged it, and sharpened the image. Brighton Avenue. I knew that street. It was on the far side of the neighborhood, a stretch of quiet road where houses sat farther apart, lined with trees that provided just enough cover for someone who didn't want to be seen. If the SUV had been parked there before they came to my house, it meant they were waiting, watching. I started the car and headed toward Brighton Avenue. The entire drive, my nerves were on high alert, my mind running through every possible scenario. What if I found the SUV? What if I found them? I had no plan, no backup, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut. The one telling me that the answers weren't in some HOA file or a bank statement. They were out here. When I turned onto Brighton Avenue, it was exactly as I expected. Empty, quiet, ordinary. But halfway down the street, I spotted it. The black SUV. It was parked partially hidden by a row of trees. Engine off. Windows tinted too dark to see inside. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pulled over a few houses away. I killed the engine and sat there, heart pounding, watching. Nothing. No movement inside. No figures shifting in the seats. No sign of anyone nearby. I took a deep breath, forced down the unease clawing at my stomach, and stepped out of the car. Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, but I ignored it. I walked toward the SUV, my footsteps slow and deliberate. As I reached the driver's side door, I knocked. No response. I knocked again. Harder. Still nothing. My pulse pounded in my ears as I reached for the door handle. I hesitated for half a second, then pulled. Unlocked. I inhaled sharply as I opened the door, expecting, I don't know what, a person, a gun, something. But the SUV was empty. No keys, no paperwork, no sign of who it belonged to, except for one thing. On the passenger seat was a black folder. I reached in, grabbed it with unsteady fingers, and flipped it open. Inside were several sheets of paper, the first of which made my stomach drop. A list of addresses. I scanned the names, my pulse spiking as my own address jumped out at me. So were several others in the neighborhood. I flipped to the second page. My bank statement. All my personal information, my address, my email, my phone number, printed out in full detail. My blood turned ice cold. I flipped to the third sheet. This one was different. Not personal records, not financials. It was an internal email. It took me a second to process what I was reading. But when I did, my grip on the folder tightened. The email was from Holloway. Target identified. Confirm payment status and proceed as planned. My mouth went dry. Holloway knew. He wasn't just covering for these guys. He was part of it. I was gripping the folder so tightly that my knuckles ached. This wasn't just fraud. This was organized, deliberate, and Holloway had been feeding them information from the inside. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured, coming from the end of the street. I turned. Standing there, watching me, was Buzzcut. He was out of uniform now, jeans, black t-shirt, hands in his pockets. But I knew him immediately, and the slow, knowing smile that spread across his face made my stomach twist. You shouldn't have opened that folder. His voice was low, almost amused, like he was enjoying this. My breath hitched. He took a step forward. I took a step back. You don't understand what you've stepped into, he continued, his tone casual, like we were just two neighbors chatting. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and ran. Buzzcut didn't chase me. He didn't have to, because his message was already clear. They knew where I lived, and they were watching. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, slamming the door shut, my breath coming in short, panic bursts. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing through every terrifying possibility. Buzzcut had been waiting for me. He knew I would come looking. He knew I would find that folder. And yet, he hadn't tried to stop me, because he wanted me to know. I jammed the key into the ignition, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the engine start. As I pulled away from the curb, I checked my rear-view mirror. Buzzcut was still standing there, watching, smirking, like a man who had already won. I drove straight to the police station. Officer Green met me at the front desk. His face was unreadable as he took in my disheveled appearance, the tension in my shoulders, the way I was gripping the folder like my life depended on it. "What happened?" he asked, his voice sharp. I didn't say anything. I just handed him the folder. He flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with every sheet. When he reached the email from Holloway, his jaw clenched. Jesus Christ, he muttered. That's not all, I said, my voice hoarse. Buzzcut was waiting for me. He knew I'd find this. Green's head snapped up. Where? Brighton Avenue, I said. They left the SUV there, empty, with all this inside. My pulse was still racing. They wanted me to see it. Green didn't hesitate. He turned, grabbed his radio, and barked into it. Units respond to an incident at Westbrook HOA office. Possible suspect on location. Lock it down. My stomach seized. Holloway, I said, if he's part of this, he's not going to just sit around waiting for you. Green nodded, already in motion. Let's find out. We sped toward the HOA office, squad car lights flashing, but siren off. Green's jaw was set like stone, his grip white-knuckled on the wheel. I'm telling you, I said, gripping the seat, Holloway is involved. That folder was in their SUV. His emails are in there. If that's true, Green said, we've got a bigger problem than just some scammers. As we pulled up to the office, I spotted 2 more squad cars already parked out front. Officers were standing near the entrance, talking to someone. I squinted Rachel. She looked shaken, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her gaze darting around nervously, like she expected someone to jump out of the shadows. Green parked and jumped out. I was right behind him. Where's Holloway? He demanded. Rachel's voice trembled. He's inside, she said. Locked himself in his office. Green's eyes narrowed. Did he say why? Rachel hesitated, then whispered. He kept saying, it's gone too far. My stomach twisted. Suddenly, a loud crash came from inside the building. Rachel flinched. So, did I? Green's voice turned to steel. Open the door, Holloway. Rachel and I exchanged a nervous glance. I took a breath, every part of me screaming that this was about to get worse. And I was right. The moment the crash echoed through the building, every officer tensed. Green didn't hesitate. He motioned to one of the other cops. We're going in. One officer stepped forward with a battering ram. A single hit, and the office door burst open. We rushed inside. Holloway was sitting at his desk. The office was a mess. Paper scattered everywhere. File drawers ripped open. His laptop half closed on the desk. He had his head in his hands. But when he lifted his face, I saw it. Panic, regret, fear. Green took a step forward. It's over, Holloway. His voice was cold, sharp. We know you've been working with them. Holloway didn't deny it. He exhaled shakily, rubbing a trembling hand over his face. You have no idea what you're involved in. My stomach clenched. So you are involved. His gaze flicked to me, his eyes hollow. You shouldn't have opened that folder. Green stepped closer. Bullshit. We have evidence. Your emails, the financial records. You gave them access to personal information. Holloway closed his eyes. It wasn't supposed to go this far. His voice was barely above a whisper. They promised it would be easy, that no one would get hurt. Who's they? Green demanded. Holloway's mouth trembled. His shoulders sagged. He shook his head. I can't. Green's patience snapped. You can, because if you don't start talking, I'm hauling your ass down to the station, and you're going to start answering questions under oath. A long, heavy silence. Then Holloway broke. I was approached about a year ago by a security firm. His voice was shaky. They said they were working with the Department of Defense, that they needed access to resident records for background checks. My pulse spiked. They said it was about national security. Green's jaw clenched. And you believe them? Holloway swallowed hard. They had government contracts, badges, IDs. It all seemed legitimate. Who's the contact? Green's voice was sharp. Holloway's gaze dropped. I don't know his real name. He went by Elliot. A chill ran down my spine. Buzz cut. Green's expression darkened. And the money? Holloway let out a slow, defeated breath. They paid me to give them access. His hands were shaking. They said it was for operational expenses, surveillance, logistics. They promised it would stay quiet. His voice cracked. And when it didn't, they threatened me. Green folded his arms. Threaten you how? Holloway's lips parted. Then he looked directly at me. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd go after you. My breath hitched. Why me? I whispered. Holloway's hands were trembling now. Because you asked too many questions. Green's eyes sharpened. What are they planning? Holloway's face twisted with guilt. I don't know. I swear. But they're watching you. He exhaled shakily. You need to be careful. Suddenly, Green's radio crackled. Dispatch to all units. Reports of shots fired on Brighton Avenue. Black SUV spotted fleeing the scene. My heart slammed into my chest. That's them, I said. Green didn't hesitate. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt and snapped them onto Holloway's wrists. You're under arrest for conspiracy and fraud. Holloway didn't resist. His shoulders sagged as if a weight had finally crushed him. Green turned toward me, eyes sharp. Get in the car. I didn't argue. As we sped toward Brighton Avenue, I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. Holloway wasn't the mastermind. He was just a pawn. And the real players? They were still out there. The squad car tore through the streets, the radio blaring updates as Green gripped the wheel like a vice. I sat rigid in the passenger seat, my hands balled into fists, my heart hammering in my chest. This was it. The men who had started all of this, the ones who had stolen my information, threatened me in my own home, manipulated Holloway, were on the run. Unit in pursuit. The dispatcher crackled. Suspect vehicle heading south on Brighton Avenue. Black SUV, no plates. Green's jaw tightened. We're close. As we rounded a corner, I saw it. The black SUV, Buzzcut's SUV, tearing through a stop sign, speeding down a side street. Green gunned the accelerator, the siren wailing as we closed the distance. Dispatch, we have visual. Green barked into the radio. Engaging pursuit. The SUV swerved sharply, cutting through traffic. My pulse spiked as I caught a glimpse of Buzzcut through the windshield. He glanced back at us, eyes calm, mouth curled in that same smirk. He wasn't panicking. He was in control. Do you think they're running? I asked, my voice tight. No, Green muttered. They're leading us somewhere. Ahead, the SUV swerved left hard into a narrow side street. Green followed without hesitation. But as soon as we turned the corner, my stomach dropped. A dead end. The SUV didn't slow down. It barreled straight toward the chain-link fence at the end of the road. No way, I breathed. The vehicle smashed through the fence. Metal twisted. Debris scattered. And then they were gone. Green slammed the brakes. We jumped out, running toward the wreckage. Pieces of the fence were strewn across the pavement. Tire tracks leading into the woods beyond. The SUV had vanished into the tree line. Green's hands balled into fists. Son of a... I turned in a slow circle, my pulse hammering. They were getting away. Again. How the hell did they know we were coming? I asked, my voice thick with frustration. Green's face darkened. Because Holloway was still talking to them. My stomach twisted. He was right. Even though Holloway had been cornered, arrested, he had still warned them. Maybe not with a phone call, maybe not in words, but somehow they had known. They're gone, I said, my voice hollow. Not for long, Green muttered. We stood at the edge of the woods, staring at the fresh tire tracks disappearing into the shadows. My hands clenched at my sides, the reality of it sinking in. This wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just a scam. This was organized. It was deliberate. And these men, whoever they were, had been planning this for a long time. I wasn't just a random target. I had stumbled into something bigger. And I had a feeling this was far from over. Green turned his radio, his voice sharp as steel. Dispatch! We've lost visual on the suspect vehicle. Last seen heading southeast toward the state line. Be advised, suspects are armed and dangerous. The radio crackled. Copy that. Green turned toward me, his gaze cold, determined. They're going to make a mistake eventually. He exhaled slowly. And when they do, we'll be ready. I stared out at the darkened woods, my heartbeat still uneven, my breath unsteady. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. When people think of scams, they imagine cheap tricks. Fake emails, stolen credit card numbers. Low-level con artists try and make a quick buck. But sometimes the scam is just the surface. Sometimes, when you pull a single thread, the entire web beneath it starts to unravel. This wasn't just fraud. This was something bigger. I wasn't just dealing with criminals. I was dealing with professionals. But here's the thing about people who believe they have all the power. They never expect someone to fight back. And I wasn't backing down. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories like this. Don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. And tell me in the comments, have you ever encountered something that felt off? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and always trust your instincts.